Hello and welcome everyone to the lecture H538, and we are standing here at Hjortberga Domaring. I don't know how to translate that into English, but it's an early Iron Age foundation for a tomb, and we are standing in the middle of 9 different stones. We can look around here and you see all of them. This is situated on a hill in Närke, which is the name of the province. Here people were buried circa 500 BC, and it has a fantastic view over Närkeslätten, the plains of Närke. And for me this is the only visible mound for a very long distance, so people must have put up a great work getting these stones up here, and the heaviest must have been at least 20 tons. It's a fantastic setting because it makes me also think about the stone garden in Kyoto. It's a stone garden situated in a temple called Heiji, if I'm not mispronouncing the whole thing. And there you can find 15 stones. And wherever you are situated in the garden, you cannot see more than 14. It doesn't matter how you situate yourself. And that is a showing that the world consists of perspectives, and that's why I called this lecture Många perspektiv in Swedish, which would be a lot of perspectives in English. And we have a special guest here today, Nadia, who's coming all the way from Stockholm / the United States. It's a great honor to have her here with us today. And she also brought her lovely dog Lexi. So if there will be any more interruptions, it's Lexi dragging Nanya over the mold. And we were talking about different personas. Nadia made a piece of art to show that we all people have different personalities. There is actually a saying in Swedish, and I think in English as well. A bad person is often perceived to be two-faced. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And oddly enough, if you would think of a person who has only one face, one personality, and if that would be possible to put that person into the Japanese society, I don't know what would happen, but somebody speculated in this, and if that person was in a village, they would probably throw him off a rock because it would be to them an abomination. It would be so strange that never perceived. For in the Japanese way of thinking, you cannot be a whole and a sane person if you don't at least have 12 sides to you. Often there are loads more. This is what makes up a whole person, a singular person to them. That is that you can be very, very different at different occasions. Whereas in the West, we want to have an essence, one meaning, one material substance. That is one person. And I will try to look at that subject a little bit today here. And I will start with this. I've been trying to draw here, and it's a picture that can be seen in 2 ways. I don't know if that is visible. If you look at it in one way, you can see the silhouette of 2 people. But if you look at it from another perspective, you can see a vase. Excuse me. Sorry. sun in my eye. This is a very good model of how the world actually works. There are no singular perspective in the world. And whenever you look in different subjects, as we have done before, for instance quantum physics, but also Heidegger, Derrida, chaos theory, looking at different culture, for instance the Japanese culture, but also the Indian culture, there is a very, very good understanding that we are composed of different parts, different perspective, and so is reality. A very common difference that we often use in language and in thinking is that there is a difference between object and subject. Whereas in the object, usually a thing, you have the properties. And the subject is the one who experiences that. The perceiver, the consciousness, the mental part. The part having the properties is not alive, it's static, and it's always like that, at least during foreseeable time, like these stones. So in the classical physics and in the view of ordinary people, we see these stones as always being here, whereas our consciousness constantly changes. We have a famous problem, and this is one of the biggest problems in philosophy of science, and also cognitive science, and that how is it that different subjects perceive the same object? This is a classic. And many philosophers and many thinking people and a lot of ordinary people think this is a problem you can't get through, because you need to have a subject, it looks like, to have different people, but you also need to explain why something is the same. And therefore we come to the conclusion the object is always the same, like these stones and also my thermos, the city of Örebro over there. I try to put a hypothesis here that that doesn't need to be the case. It could be that reality is more like these vases. So having a separation between subject and object is just one perspective of many. There are others. It could be that the line between the subject and object is different, but it can also be that the subject and object are exactly the same, something that we see in quantum physics. And quantum physics, that's called the collapse of the hyperposition. It's a weird word, but it means that an observer collapses the hyperposition. So therefore a cat is no longer living in limbo, being neither dead nor alive, and it becomes to be only alive or only dead. That's how the quantum physics explains what happens. And that is from perspective that the person who hears the explanation is living in the classical world. And of course, it's a very, very hard pill to take, because it goes against the grain of everything we are thinking. It might not be the very best way to explain something, maybe the most lenient way, but it's not the correct way. It's better to see that both the subjective, the observer, and the thing observed have different properties, different perspective at every single moment. Take the cat, for instance. We usually say that the cat is furry. It could be red as our yard cat. It has eyes, it has whiskers, teeth, and a tail, hopefully, if it's a healthy cat. But if we take all these properties that we can observe, which I mentioned now, and maybe 1,000 more, we still think there is an object out there apart from the properties. Being a cat, being in the existence of being a cat, without any properties. And the question is that really possible? Can there be objects without properties? And I will venture that far to say no. I don't know how that will be possible. There's something wrong in the thinking. It's paradoxical. And this paradox stems already from the Greek. And it actually started exactly at the same time as these stones were put up here, 500 BC. At the same period in Greece, they made this mistake, if you like, of thinking that there are actually objects apart from the properties they have. Something that always exists. And there was even a change in language. A new word was constructed, and it was more or less to be, estain. And this means existence. From there stems our word existence. And in a way, this word is the culprit of all the problems we're facing in daily life when we try to understand what's happening to us, especially when it comes to quantum physics. We had recently, I think it was this winter, a discussion in a group that both my friend Kalle here and I are participating in. And in that group, a quantum physicist wanted to explain Schrödinger's cat. And he tried to start with the idea of existence. And what he said in short words was that something exists and it doesn't exist. And I would say that's not the proper grammar of the word exist. That's not how the Greek used it, and that's not how we use it today. And of course the other person, he didn't understand, and I would say he was actually quite docile and willing to understand. So he said to the quantum physicist, could you please explain me how it's possible that a thing can be both alive and dead? How something can exist and at the same time not exist? And the discussion started, and it was an exchange of questions and answers. And I think after this was mainly done in emails, after 5, 6, 7, 8 emails, it came to a bit sharper debate.
And a hostile ending.
Well, it came to blows. The quantum physicist sort of suggested that the person wasn't the brightest in a very, very polite way. Of course, this is still Sweden. We don't say anything open. Never, ever. And they're no longer friends, I think. Even if they explain to each other and everybody else that they are friends, I don't think so. And the reason for this is we have a grammar for the word existence, and we had that for 2,500 years. And to say that something exists and don't exist, it's not proper. There are other ways, I think, other omvägar, I don't know the word for that, but not the straight path, but another path that could be longer. It is longer. Yes, it's more complicated, but it doesn't strain your logic. You can open yourself up because it's an opening process at the same time. And the very same quantum physicist who mentioned this said it took him 5 years, and he was studying it full time. He is a quantum physicist. It took him 5 years. So you can't really demand that the person should get this, and especially I don't think over email. That would make it even harder. And also that fact I mentioned so many times, try to be a bit repetitive on this case, but at least 200 books are presently on the market that try to explain quantum physics to the layman without unnecessary math or geometry or arithmetic or not too complicated physical concepts. But I would say all to this day none of them have really worked, because nobody still knows about quantum physics. A big investigation or research in Germany showed that it was less than a thousandth of a percent that understood the main concept of quantum physics. And a lot of physicists in that set didn't understand the basic concepts as well. You can actually work with a thing and still not understand it, because you can do the math, you can do the experiments, but you needn't take it to heart. So I'd say it's a little bit much to demand that an ordinary person, be that well educated, would take this easily. And I could even say that if he would have said I understand it, that would be a little bit weird. Could have been a diplomacy, but if he really said I really understand what you're saying, no, I think it's a tougher nut to crack. And I would say that reality, to get more real, needs more perspective. That is what makes reality like a poem, having more depth. Because all poems, they can be understood in many, many different ways. And that's part and parcel of the poem. A poem that could only be understood in one way wouldn't be a very good poem. A piece of art that could only be understood in only one way wouldn't be a very nice piece of art. I don't even know what it would be. It would be sort of symbol, like the sign that showed us the way here. But I would say even that one could be misunderstood or understood in a different way. Let me give you an example. Many years ago, the company that sells aspirin, I don't know the name of the company, maybe Bayer in Germany, they want to sell aspirin in Saudi Arabia. It was a very big and lucrative market, and for that purpose they contacted a marketing firm, and the marketing firm put up to make huge signs on the motorway, because I thought it was a good moment in the desert to expose the person to the marketing, the commercial. And I had 3 big pictures without letters, because you're in a hurry, you can't read what it says. The only thing you could see was aspirin with big, big letters like the Hollywood letters. So you know what it was about. The first sign was a person suffering from something, headache probably. He was in pain, like this, suffering. The next picture was a big picture of the tube with aspirin, You could clearly see these were their aspirins. And then the final picture was a liberated person, smiling, being free of headache, whatever pains was afflicting him. And the marketing firm thought they would understand this, because we haven't used any letters. This can only be understood in one way. It was a huge disaster. Aspirin didn't sell anything after that, even less than they sold before. And it took them 15 years to be able to sell any aspirin more in Saudi Arabia. And what is the reason for that? Anybody got a clue? Well, you know.
Well, they didn't understand the sign.
They did?
They did?
Yeah. They understood everything. Why, thank you. This makes the example even better. But the marketing firm was a successful marketing firm. They didn't know either.
Yeah.
And they lost billions and billions of the whole thing. And everybody understood it. Well, maybe somebody missed out. The majority understood, 99%. Well, to the Arab, what he saw, and every Arab in the whole world, and also the Jews, and a lot of people in Asia, is that it was a person being happy, smiling, enjoying his life. And then he took an aspirin, and after that he was suffering badly. The reason is the perspective is different. Nobody figured this out before. They read from the right to the left. Well, that goes as well for pictures. And that even goes for how they look in the world. They look from right to left. If they're doing a scanning here, they start from the right. And it's even so how they put their thoughts together. But we don't think about these things. And when I heard it the first time, we were a group of 30 people. Nobody of us know it either. You don't think it, because not even the Arabs, if you would have asked them, is this good? Maybe they got convinced in the beginning, because you easily pop over to the other way of reading. This is very dangerous. But there is always a perspective that underlies all perspective. And especially in neurology, we found out so many differences between different cultures and nations. How we perceive the world, we structure it very differently. And writing has a very, very big significance. We would have shown this picture to an alphabet, it wouldn't make any sense at all, because there's no order. We learn order by an alphabet. And in Taiwan, we read from the top to the bottom. It wouldn't have worked either. You would stop with the top part of the pictures and then go to the middle, and you wouldn't have the same sequence. So sequential thinking is something we learned. And already here you see also this idea that it could be only one relationship. Like there is a subjective me walking around. Oh, there's a stone. I am here and the stone exists outside of me. There is a distance between us. The stone has all its properties, and they either, depends what sort of philosopher you are, either you think the properties are in the stone, which I think is a bit extreme, or you say that some other properties are in the stone, like length, width, and depth, and weight maybe, and you say that the color gets produced in my eyes, and maybe in my hands, the, how do you say, the skrovlighet,
Texture.
the texture gets produced. And the smell, I don't know if the stone smells, but possibly it does. Nice smell. And you know, a lot of philosophers have said that all the properties are divided in between. And I don't know how people can come to these conclusions, but those were actually conclusions of Hume and loads of philosophers. And it more or less goes without saying it can't be that way. Actually, you can't really explain how it is, because that's what we found out in neurology and science of cognition. This is not something that you should explain. It's a ludicrous question. It's a little bit like saying something exists and doesn't exist. It goes against the grammar, how you use the word. I can't, for instance, say, I'm using the word thermos to something that you can put in a liquid in. That would be ludicrous. And you have to protest with all right. Well, I say stones is something that fly in the air. It's also ludicrous. It's not how we use the word stone. But it doesn't say anything about the stone. It says more about how we use the word. I would say that reality gets more real when there are more perspectives. And one perspective is very unreal. Then you get a reality that's almost like, how do you say, Puchomkin kulis. It was a famous general in Russia, and he got the mission to construct a new Russia in the 18th century. And he didn't have the time or the money to do a lot of the stuff they asked him to do. So what he did instead, he had like very, very big pieces of cardboard or wood that were two-dimensional. They looked like towns, they looked like factories or churches or whatever. And when you went by the train quite fast, it looked like a proper town. This is actually true. Somebody did this. But it wasn't real. If the train would have stopped, God forbid, and the Tsar or whoever it was would have walked out, he would have not appreciated the town. It wouldn't have felt real to him. He couldn't go to a coffee shop and order coffee. He couldn't meet any people. He couldn't buy new shoes in the shoemakers, nothing like that. Many different properties. Reality takes a lot of properties. And although it might look real on a distance, that's still on a distance. The subject seeing something on a distance. And we need to be precise here and think, yeah, I see a town on a distance. I have that perception, and that's what I have. I don't know if it's a town there. And the same thing we do with the cat. You have to start with what you actually perceive. And if you don't perceive a cat, it's almost a bit of nonsense to say that the cat exists somewhere. What you do know is I saw the cat a couple of days ago, and usually a cat comes back after a couple of days, or a week, or an hour. That's what we know. I had a cat myself. It's like that. You let the cat out in the morning, and I don't, to say that I know it exists. Somebody asked me, does your cat exist? Well, I could say that, but it would be also sort of nonsense in a way. Well, I would answer the person that I saw it yesterday, and that's what I know. It could also be I saw it at a distance, like this town. But it could have been a fox. And if I tell Kalle this, I saw it at a distance, he would know that. That's the information he has. That's the knowledge he has. And it could be sufficient, but in some cases he would say this is not sufficient knowledge, that I would bet $1 million that the cat exists. So you always have these things, and I think magicians are very good with this. One of my favorites is Darren Brown. and he has like a wicked intuition that people think about existence, and actually what they should think about is properties. And when they don't do that, they make mistakes. And he has shown that people make huge mistakes. They misperceive reality. They don't even know in which world they're living. And existence could be a terrible, horrible trap. And he actually said that. The belief in existence is very, very dangerous because it tricks people. Also, coming back to Japan, they don't talk much about existence. We're talking about the cat. We need to tell the person who's asking about the cat, if I saw it myself, how I saw it, how sure I am that I saw it, and you actually have some small suffixes that you add to, like in a very precise way, tell another person like you about my experience. You always have to do that, and it's horribly complicated. It's a horribly complicated thing to do. You need to rethink every movement you do. You need before you open your mouth and say that exists, you cannot. You need to see how you perceive it, even towns. Because then you're pretty sure, of course, but you need to say that. And you also need to say that I heard it from somebody else. And how that person perceived it. Did he or she hear it, see it, feel it, sense it? All this perspective. And this way of seeing on reality is completely different. It's easier with existence because you don't have to be, I can come here and say, I saw an elephant over there. That's just existence. I don't have to tell how I saw it. And maybe after now you find out, oh, I saw an elephant on a signboard or something like that. It was a picture of it. These things happen. Even our eyes in the West are today different. We look for existence, objects. And one of the things that always stayed in my mind is Darren Brown shows one time that he goes to the, how do you say that? The races. Yeah, he goes to the races and he has a fellow with him, and the BBC is there filming the whole thing. And he said, I'm going to win the races today. I'm going to bet on this horse. He bets on a horse and he doesn't win. And Darren Brown says, I still won. So he went down to where you get the payout, and he shows the ticket to the person. And the person pays it out. And nobody knows what happened. He changed the sequence. He did the same thing as the signs in Saudi Arabia. We are very used to we all doing the same thing. We need to do that to upkeep the illusion of existence. Because what I had to do in Japan is to learn a completely different way of seeing the world. And it took time. And it was a complete effort. And it's an effort for the Japanese as well. You never get used to it. You need to pay loads more attention to what's happening around you. You need to observe. You need to understand how sure you are on your observations. And you don't have 100% existence, never. There's no such thing in Japanese. It's always a scale, always a scale. So all this Platonism or Greek thinking of existence wouldn't have worked. And this Darren Brown went back again. He took all the money he got, like £100, and he put another horse. And that horse didn't win either. And he went back, and now the odds were high, really high. And he got all that money out. It was like £10,000. They showed it on television. It was witnesses seeing the whole thing. And these people in the payouts were two people that never made mistakes in their lives. One been working for 35 years, never made a mistake. He's banned now from all races. He cannot go to the casino, can't go anywhere.
Brown is banned.
Darren Brown. And he doesn't do any trickery either. He doesn't really cheat people. But what he does is change the sequence, because we have sequence in everything, and existence is one of those sequences. We're not aware of it. And you can say quantum physics is like an alarm bell. Is that something in your sequences are wrong? You trust on things that you produce yourself, together with other people. You do this communally. You dance the same dance. If you dance salsa, I cannot do the foxtrot. That's how the world works. And in this dance, these things get produced. And what happened 500 before Christ had really, really big effects on all our thinking about the world today. And it started right then and there. We got the words, we got the evidence for this, how it happened. And there existence started. And there the idea of it could be only one relationship between me and a stone, or me and a thermos, or me or the grass, whereas in reality could be loads more. I would say the relations are infinite. We just need to discover them. And that is going to make reality much more voluminous, or whatever you say, more real. No, not like this
Polysemous.
No, like this Russian general, Puchomkin was his name. I'm going to find out the English name for those things he did. Something...
Facades.
Yeah. Facades. Cheers. Facades. Get into reality, you notice that it has many perspectives. And the more perspective you put into reality, the realer it gets. And it's the same with the personality. For instance, in Japan, a person who only has one side is not a real person. It's not an honest person. Never an honest person. But if you have many persons within you, and you act differently constantly, then you make up a whole person, a fuller person. It's so different. Not even I get the grip on it. I never did in Japan, actually. For me, it looked absurd, and I would finish off the most absurd thing is one person I got to know in Japan, and we got friends, and therefore we started using different words. And one common expression in Japanese is like, well, it means like more or less yes, or I hear you. It's something you use in between friends. Asoka, that's how it is. Oh yes, oh I hear you, Asoka. And it feels nice to use Asoka, because it means that you're friends. Usually you say so desu ka, which is more formal, somebody you don't know. He called me one day and said different things, that we should meet up or something. He had some plans. And on the phone I said, Asoka, yes. And I saw the family standing around me. They looked like this. And I was thinking, am I standing on something? Have I my foot on the little dog they had? They really had a lap dog. It was this size. Something happened. And the father went to me, you never ever use Asoka on the phone. How could I know? It was the same person. It was a new relation on the phone. Isn't that weird? Nobody can know about these things. You can live in the country for ages. I was thankful they even told me. Usually they wouldn't have told you. They would just say you're a weird foreigner doing mistakes. Put your foot into it. We can't know about these things. Some people can tell about them. It could also be they're not even aware of it. They just react to it. But it was very interesting. I told him and said I was a bit shocked. How can it be? But it goes to show that our way of doing things that we have in our bloodstream, in our like the back or amygdala, or in our reactions, are not the same everywhere, and they are fundamentally different if you go to some place somewhere else, and they're strictly not part of reality. We construct that, and if the constructions doesn't serve us, we should change them. add perspective, to live a happier life, to be wholer, warm individual. Otherwise, I'll have to strain myself if I have to be the same personality in every situation. I would have to lie. I had to indulge myself in social lies to pretend that I say something. And that's a strain. I think the Japanese and the Koreans, the Chinese would think that would have been a strain. They've never done it, but if they would try it, they would think that it's strenuous to lie all the time. It's better to have a personality you can change. Like it's more like a theater or something like that. And we often say in the West, oh, that's just theater, something bad. Well, if you go to a restaurant and have a dinner, you wouldn't say to the chef, oh, it was just theater. You made a theater, the food was theater. How do you mean? You made it up. It wasn't pure essence. It wasn't real. You just invented this. Tell me the truth. I won't pay for this food. It's just theater. And I would say, did it taste good? Did you enjoy it? Yeah, but it's not part of the problem is different. I felt the whole restaurant to be a theater. That's how we reason in the West. Our way of thinking is sometimes perceived as really, really single-minded. And it's our way of doing the stuff that sort of counts, nothing else. And I would say this gives a loads more opportunities for more harmony and for being a whole person. Because with more perspective, like in art, like in poetry, like in literature, like in everything we do, with more perspective and more meanings, everything gets more interesting. This doesn't have to be a tomb. It could be a nice place to have a picnic, but it could also be a way that you have a viewpoint. It could be something in the military where you have like cannons, but it can also be a place to have a party. There's so many different things, and we found one thing here latest time we were here yesterday. There's loads of junipers here, and that's another perspective of the whole thing. I really love junipers, and I think afterwards we should collect some of them. Okay. Well, I say thank you very much. Thank you for visiting us. Nadia, very kind. Thank you, Kalle, for the camera. And I say over and out from Hjortsberga.
Wonderful. Thank you.